Damn. Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by on another stream. Today we have Alex on stream, an artist who I've actually talked to and like had a stream kind of off stream with before, and he explained a lot of Octane camera stuff to me that he did for a personal project, and it just seemed natural to have him on the stream. And a lot of people were super excited when I posted about it, so this will be up on YouTube as well. Matt Brown is going up next week from last month's stream. And all the other streams are up there if you ever need to watch those. But yeah, we can switch over and just get right into it. Hey, Alex.
Hey, I say.
We gotta pretend like we weren't just chatting right before this. It's the movie magic of this whole thing. So yeah, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of, your name and what you do slash, who you are, and then we can get into all the other stuff.
Mhm. So yeah, my name is Alex Rych, and you know, from Germany, and I'm into this 3D world since 5 or 6 years almost, and actually I started way back like 10 or 11 years ago with photography, and I actually like learned it professionally in school and stuff. And from there I transitioned into DP work, and then somewhere in this whole 3D thing, yeah,
Yeah, just
crossed my
stumbled
line.
into it, and you're just like, wow, I'm
Yeah.
actually pretty good at this.
I'm not sure about this, especially like 6 years ago, but it was super magical. Like
Mm.
I, I'm not sure what work I saw back then and realized this is actually 3D and it's done with Cinema 4D or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But probably work from Cornelius and such guys,
Right.
and like I don't know. It's very magical that you can do this shit from zero if you want to. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, nobody does this, but you could, and that's very interesting.
Right. I think that, that was something similar to myself, is that as a kid, I didn't even know it was like a possibility or like 3D at all. I just knew that like there's the magical thing in movies that just isn't the real part, and you're just like, wow, that's like really cool that like that's like their imagination put onto like something that everyone else can see. And then that's kind of like the gateway drug was like After Effects, and then Element 3D, and then actual 3D, and then Houdini. It's just like a rabbit hole that like at any point you could stop and be like, I'm done, I'll be like good at this. But like it's just like continues to like, what is like, the L tree, kind of like it just branches off into like infinity, and you can never really learn all the things. But it is cool that it's all made up. Like it takes no resources other than computer and software. But it's just like you could have a full movie set in your computer, and it's just like to buy one softbox is like $400, but it's just like a
Right,
rectangle you drag out, and you're like, awesome, cool, that's lit the exact way I want it.
right.
um
Yeah, yeah.
so
By the way, I'm not sure. I do have the stream open, and I see maybe the wrong screen.
ah, you see the wrong screen. Hmm. Let me kick it open and see. Let's do some technical difficulties.
Or am I in the wrong place here?
I don't know. Olaf hasn't said anything. He's
Like I said,
watching at
I haven't
home.
used Twitch in the past, so probably I have just clicked the wrong thing,
I see
you
us.
know?
Okay, I'll shoot you this on Instagram.
Oh, no, no, I found it.
There.
Awesome.
Cool. I panicked for a second. I was like, what am I streaming then if I'm not streaming us? Okay. Olaf says we look great, so perfect. Yeah, Alex is just talking to a blank screen over Zoom because I have my other camera gone, so he's just in the dark hoping that he's actually talking to somebody. But yeah, I was that's interesting that you started with photography, because Marius, someone that we also know, is like very heavy into photography, so much so that it's kind of annoying that it's like, did you render this, or is this a photo you took on the street? Like I can't tell because they're both very much your style. So what kind of got you into photography to enough to go to like school for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I always try to do some sort of creative work, and then a friend of mine had a DSLR lying around, and
Mm,
I picked it up and started playing with it. And I think that I quickly fell in love with this whole thing and lenses, and then you understand, okay, the if I do have a lens wide open, I get that blurry background, and all
right.
those magical moments. And then I just talked to a couple studios in my town, and I think it was the second or third one. um and I just had a couple printed pictures, and he said would give me the opportunity to start working there, and do my trainee program. And that's how it started.
Yeah, I do
And
remember. Yeah.
from there I really picked up the camera like 3 years, like every day, and like there was no nonstop shooting. And
Mm.
yeah.
I do remember DSLR was like that magical word. I didn't even know what it meant. I just knew that that was like the cool back, like bokeh, like that has to be a DSLR. You can't get it with the point and shoot. And so I was just like, oh, yeah, okay. I guess I'll like wait until I can get one of those because they're like $2,000 and I can't afford that as like a 13-year-old. And so I got like a camcorder with like, everyone had them. They were like kind of a tube and you like kicked out the screen. You could like zoom in and out. And I was like, this is what I'll do stuff with because I can kind of like focus with it, but it's still like a locked lens. Like there was no like attachment. But DSLR was the dream for a while. Then it kind of just got surpassed really quickly, and they were like very affordable and very like everywhere. And you're like, oh, okay. But yeah, I think that that's like having a base in photography actually helps a ton when making composition. Um, Finding light, kind of like I know that I always was like sunlight, like anything in sunlight I would much rather shoot than like spend time setting up like soft boxes and like light something. And so in 3D I was just like daylight, I'll just use daylight and like make it the time of day I want, like golden hour, noon. Did you like more of like the studio side of like photography, or were you more of like a street photography, like natural?
Rather the studio side, actually,
Oh,
because
okay.
it was a portrait heavy studio, so I had to learn
Mm,
that stuff anyways. And from there we had like these portable strobe systems,
mm.
and they were super heavy, but I took them everywhere to shoot portraits outside with flashes and stuff.
Mm.
So yeah. And I pretty much always tried to do it a little bit different than the other guys in the town, and always
Mm.
went quite dark, I would say.
Hmm.
And yeah.
Just more moody than like most of the
Right.
photog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it like inspired by films that you had watched where like that's where you kind of like wanted to color your stuff, or was it just like that's just like what you were like, this looks cooler than it being like sterile and like perfect like a commercial shoot?
Yeah, I would say it's very much influenced by movies and
Hmm.
stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
And and it still is, also
Yeah.
for the 3D work.
What made you go with photography instead of like video? Was it just that it was like easier to kind of to manage, and there was just like, I mean, video comes with it a lot more stuff to be like watching out for as you shoot, but or was it just like you just liked photography so you went for photography?
um yeah, it was it was easier to get started with photography
Hmm.
back then, I guess. And that's, yeah, it's as easy as that, I guess.
And
And from
so,
there I transitioned into camera stuff and shooting, and you know pretending to be a director of photography.
yeah, how did that all kind of transition out of like, did you like graduate from university and like go into just like that was like the field that you could get hired in because that's what your degree was in, or kind of what did you do like outside of university?
Like, honestly, I was never into, like, too much into, I need to earn money with this stuff. I mean, yeah, it was my
Mm,
job, but I was never like interested in what brings the most money. Like, then I could have just shot weddings and stuff, and
Right.
but I don't know. It's like during my trainee in that photography photo studio thing, I picked up, like, we had a new camera, and it was like Nikon stuff back in the days, and then there was like the D800 or something like that, and you could actually shoot kind of okayish video with it. And so I started to play around, and my boss back then like saw the potential and bought me some lights and stuff, and then we actually got hired for shooting, you know, various like events and stuff like that, and that's pretty much how it started.
Yeah.
Like the transition into the movie world, if you will.
Yeah, I worked as like a tech in our like universities. Like, yeah, we videoed all the events for the school, which was great because it's you know, it's not great pay, but it's like enough to pay a college student, and at the same time you're like getting really familiar with like, oh, like you have to be able to like set up it all and like shoot like relatively quickly, and like you really do have to know kind of what does and does not work. It's like, you know, when it's on your own you can kind of tinker for forever and be like, oh, I think that this is right, or I don't think that this is right. But like when you're there to document something that's happening only once, you get pretty good at like making sure you don't ruin that. But whereas 3D, it's like, oh no, the render didn't work, just re-render it and like fix the thing. But it's like when it's a live event that you have to be capturing, you're like much more on edge and like diligent about like backups, making sure that like things are in focus, like all these things that in the digital world are like kind of just forgotten immediately because it's like, oh, just undo and, you know, re-render it or send it somewhere. But that's interesting that that's I think it's actually pretty prevalent in your style, along with a bunch of other artists that like you see that their background is photography or video or something, kind of like Olaf. Like very much so you can tell that like their approach to compositing, or you know, when we were talking about like you set up a really insane, like, or not insane, but like a very detailed and like photorealistic and based in reality Octane camera when it like, you know, they came out with that new settings and everything, and you kind of knew based on your photography what to like set those settings to. Whereas a lot of people who may not know that are just sliding a slider and being like, I don't know, it gets brighter or darker, I'll just pick the one that looks right. When you're like, well, that doesn't, at the end when you layer all these things 1% on top of each other to reach a final image, you're just like, that's off, but I don't really know why. But like when you have the base of photography or something like that, you're like, okay, well, it's off because my exposure is really high, but I compensated by like vignetting the whole thing all the way down to like make it darker on the edges. And it's like, that's just not what you would do at all. And then, you know, the grain and all of that stuff is like things we know we should add, but we don't know why we should add them or what makes them added into an image in reality. And I think that all of those like little 2% things are very interesting when you see someone's background. So I think that it shows through in a lot of your stuff. So when did you decide? Was it just because of you wanted to do things that would be way too costly to do and shoot in real life, and you decided to go into 3D? Or is it like you said you saw some of these other artists and you're like, oh, I would like to pick up the tool they're using and figure it out?
Well, that's a good
That's a
question.
lot of words that you have to process now.
um, like you know, I get tired pretty quickly, I would say, and so I usually look for new things which could interest me. And I don't know, I have seen, like I said, a lot of works which I found very interesting, and of course you want to, you know more and learn more about it, like how is it done and how can you create these things, and then you realize that it will take years until this will work somehow. But yeah,
I mean, yeah.
What was the question again?
Oh,
Like,
I was just like, was do you have like a specific moment where you're like, oh, 3D, I should learn that and like, you know, really become proficient at that the same way I am at more of these physical, real things that aren't on the computer?
I think, you know, like the first steps were really more like, you know, playing around and you know, trying to learn the software somehow and understanding these abstract concepts. And My cousin is actually a dev at Maxon, right? And
That's
he
nice.
yeah, and um, like I already knew there's some sort of 3D software he's working at, and I think this is the reason why I picked up Cinema 4D
Mm,
instead of 3ds Max or whatever. But yeah, this is pretty much how I got started with this whole 3D thing, and then it took quite a few years and till I understood you could do these crazy things
mm,
like I mean, if you see a movie, right, and still today if I see a movie which looks incredibly real, I have no idea how they do that, honestly. Like, I can imagine it, but I have no idea,
right.
and I don't know what tools they use and how many years it would render on my machine and stuff like that. But I mean, you someone you realize that Octane, for example, can do crazy things with simulating lenses almost,
Hmm.
and it, I don't know, it's endless fun to me,
Right.
trying to make it to like, it's a we always talk about imperfections in 3D, like roughness maps and all that
Hmm.
jazz, and for me the lens is just another layer to make it look and feel a bit more real and
Right.
believable. And Octane is really good at it, actually. And yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I got like a new like wave of inspiration once I realized like that there were distortion maps that you could put that were like emulating, anamorphic lens, and like they're that like orange, yellow, greenish like gradient that I was just like, I don't know what to do with this, but I got it in like a custom bokeh pack, and I was like, I don't know what to do with that. And then I was like, oh, you can load it in here, and then like the image is like warped the way it would be from like a lens. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like that's like something I always did in post, but when it's on the camera in 3D, it like picks up extra light that's like coming in and like does the stuff it should. Or at least I think. I have no technical knowledge of what that gradient map does, but I think it just bends things in space for the camera like a lens would. But and then you went through all that very detailed stuff of the Octane camera where it's tons of sliders of like real world things that they brought in, and it's just like it really helps sell it. And like you could see it on that personal project you did where you're just like, this looks like I wouldn't know like unless you like showed me the wireframes. Like it looks like you just shot something that you had like lying around with like a bunch of different angles. And I think that that's like, and then your comp process on top of that. When did you kind of, or how did you get into like compositing and that sort of thing? Was that just something that like came along with 3D, or were you kind of like your Photoshop and that stuff brought over into moving images?
Well, I played with, like, before I picked up Cinema 4D, I was playing with After Effects and Element 3D, like
Mm-hmm.
probably everybody did back in the
Yeah.
day. And so I was, doing a lot of After Effects stuff. Also, like I always love to create like distorted stuff and things which kind of look bad, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of this footage fuck up thing in After Effects, and yeah. So but honestly, I hate After Effects. Like today, I'm not using it anymore.
You're DaVinci, right? And that's what you use.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And for a personal project, I'm not even rendering passes usually. I'm, maybe a light pass or something like that. But usually I just bring it into Resolve and grade it, and that's it. So,
Mm.
and like, it works good with Octane, for example. I think with engines like Redshift, you might have to do a little bit more in post, but you can do a lot of nice things in camera, if you will, in Octane. So
Hmm.
I'm more of the beauty guy and grade it, and that's it.
Yeah,
You know.
I was staunchly against compositing for the longest time, purely because I couldn't composite things well like other more senior artists who had use physical render and then make it look passable, and they were like, well, we composite it, and I was like, okay, well, I can make an Octane render look pretty decent just out the box. So I don't really know why I need to like not turn on the bloom to add it in post. I was like, I'm just gonna run it on the camera if it's for myself. But I understand more, you get into production, you're like, it's because, I am not the only person touching this image, and other people might not want bloom that hard, and it's way harder to get rid of it than it is to just like slightly add it in later. So I've slowly come around to compositing and tried out Resolve and Nuke a little bit, but I'm still just a noob in After Effects doing the best I can with all that stuff, and it's god awful 32-bit workflow. But that's interesting. Yeah, just to get the most beautiful image you can in render is like a newer thing with GPU rendering. I think is like kind of a lot of us new kids are like, well, we can get it pretty good at like when we render it, so why would
Right.
we like give us ourselves a bad render just to make better in comp with passes? But pipeline is much different in production. So but yeah, I think that
Yeah, I mean
that's
it's true.
mhm.
Usually I'm working on very kind of hard to describe it nicely, but on very little gigs where I'm usually doing all by myself,
Mhm.
and but yeah, I usually render passes and do all that post stuff because if you do have a product and client changes mind and you have to change the color or something, then
Yeah.
you're obviously you don't want to re-render 30 hours or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's I think a lot of becoming just more experienced is you just realize like the battles and the time that you should spend and where you should spend it, and things of like I love like procedural workflows, but like sometimes it's just more efficient to do it all editable, just like push pull things the way you need them, get the thing out the door, versus like spending a day being like, wow, this is very procedural. It's like, cool, well, we don't use it ever again, so maybe you should have spent that time just working on other stuff and not doing that. So I can see that even when you're working alone, that passes make sense when somebody else is going to come in and be like, oh, can we change the light on one side, and you're like, oh, I have to re-render it then. Or you can just be like, yeah, I'll just turn that pass off and turn it down a bit. It's like, okay, I can see the benefit to that in some way.
Right. Yeah. Are you into espresso?
Well, I was in cinema, and obviously, like most people, Simon was like the for Simon, blanking on his last name. We all know who he is. Man vs. Machine Simon, big Houdini guy,
Yeah,
big
home
C.
medal.
Yeah, I can't even
Yeah.
say it correctly, but you can. Uh,
Probably not.
he was Cinema 40 and like pushed espresso to its limits, and then switched to Houdini, and I was like, oh, Houdini is how you make the cool things. But it's actually funny that like you get to a certain point in Houdini, and then you go like, I could probably do this in Espresso and not have to go into Houdini, and then you kind of like revert back and like have like new interest in cinema, and then you reach the end again. It's just like this never-ending loop of like, which program should I use to like build this thing out? Because everyone I think is falling in love with nodes. Cinema's adding a whole new node structure that I don't understand at all, but it looks cool. But yeah, I like Espresso. It took a bit to like understand it, but once like I realized you can just drag and drop parameters, I was like, oh, this makes total sense. I don't have to like search for the thing I want. I just like drag it into that area, and I'm like, okay, cool. Wire that up to the other thing, and range mapping was like a big like aha moment where it's like, oh, any value somewhere can be a value somewhere else. I mean,
Mhm.
everyone starts with a set drive, set driven, and you feel like a hacker, but it's just once you like open that node
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, I can understand, like it's all it's doing is putting a range
Hmm.
mapper in between. It like opens up doors for like tons of stuff to be procedural in like the most basic terms. And I think that always it's just all interconnected. Opening up a new program, probably 30% of it already if you're familiar with another 3D package. It's just someone telling
Mhm.
you where are the buttons that I'm used to, and just like how do I orbit. Like that's always my biggest struggle. It's like I open up a program like Blender or Houdini, and it's just like, A, how do I move the camera? B, where are all the things that I know should be in here, but are named now different things because it's just a different like package. And then after that, you're pretty much set. If you've been using it for like us, like 5 or more years, you're probably going to be able to pick something up within like a month if you really wanted to, but that's something that I really like. Are you big into espresso and kind of setting up those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, I do use it a lot actually, and at least on personal projects because,
Hmm.
you never know if you like it's always the same question. Is it useful to do it with espresso and being faster to animate it afterwards? Or should I save the time and don't do it at all? Right.
Mm.
And but I really enjoy rigging models up. Like the one from the personal project was completely rigged.
Hmm.
So you can, you don't have to look for the right null and what to rotate and this and that. It's just all built up and you can animate it super quick then. And then you start to dive deeper, and then you have different things. Like I do have I model a what is it called, record player,
Mm.
and um then I rigged it up, and I need to shade it now, and I have no idea what I'm gonna do with this thing then. But it's all rigged, and actually you can move the tone arm over, and once the tone arm is over the vinyl, it will shoot rays at it and read
Mm.
out where the vinyl is, and these things usually tend to get a bit they are not straight anymore after a
Right.
couple of years
Mm.
usually.
Just like all
So the tone arm
wavy.
sits on it and waves with it and stuff like that. And I don't know, that's fun stuff. And
Hmm.
that's, I mean, this is obviously something you couldn't animate. Probably you could, but nobody wants to, I
Yeah.
guess. And yeah, espresso is really handy for that kind of stuff.
I
A lot
think
of fun.
that's why I really like cinema is that like there are quite a few different ways to go about it, and it seems to be kind of like in increasing like knowledge of the program or like difficulty is that like right, if you want this needle head to go up and down based on the height, you could go into that view and move that guy up every keyframe. That's like the most basic way. You could probably stack a couple effectors under it that like are aware of like spherical things and like base it off nulls and stacking layers, which is like pretty comfortable to most people now. Or you could go into Espresso and do it. Or you could like write a Python script and do it that way. There's like so many layers of ways, and it's I think meets every person that kind of it's everyone can do it their own way, or move on to like learning how to do it a more advanced way. And then at the end of it, you essentially could just like sit in a command line and make your entire scene in Python and just be like and go, and then it's like populates the whole scene with like stuff for that you would have spent days doing, which maybe one day I'll be able to do that. But I'm comfortable sitting in the effectors slash like dabbling in espresso land, especially with user data. I feel like you probably use a lot of that for rigging and like that sort of things. Do you build yourself like a bunch of sliders and things that you can just animate really quickly just for each shot kind of with all of your things you rig?
Right.
Mm.
Like
Nice.
it's, yeah, it's a fun process, and honestly, it's super quick. If Maxon was nice enough to finally update a UI of Espresso, so you can drag a node between two others or something like that, that would be
Hmm.
great.
Yeah,
Also for Redshift, obviously.
I'm a big fan of Octane's node system for
Oh
their
yeah,
thing. I just wish Espresso worked like that, where yeah, you just drag it down and it knows that like oh you're between two things. I should probably connect this versus just sitting on top of it and you like sitting there like zooming in and out trying to get that little dot just to like connect to
right.
the other one. You're like oh my gosh.
Also, it's not too small, it's not too big. Like
Hmm.
honestly, Espresso is like way too small and like yeah, it's just ugly. I mean,
It's very easy to read. Its readability is great, but its aesthetic and design is like, I mean, this is like the first pass. I wish we could get Expressive 2.0, or I mean, I'm saying this from someone who started like R14. I'm sure it was like way worse like the first time it was introduced, and it's like much better now. So we're complaining about something that's already been iterated on, but
Yeah, but it
it's
hasn't been updated in a couple of years, I guess.
right. Yes,
So
it's due,
and
especially.
honestly, the new node system, like the C nodes, I have no, like, I don't really understand why they do this, because I don't think this will be heavily used.
It yeah, it seems as
It's
though it's the same way After Effects has nodes, where you're just like, okay, I can see how this is useful, kind of, but not in the way we were all asking for nodes. It's like just nodes in name, but not nodes in like. I think it's the hardest part is that it's separated. Like you have your layer stack, which is doing one thing, and then the scene nodes do something different and are like an object in there, but not connected. Like they live separately, and I think that's the weirdest disconnect. Is that
That's right, and that's throwing me off completely, because like, honestly, why do we use cinema? Because it's so well organized. At least that's the selling point for me. You have the object manager, you have endless nulls inside nulls, which you can label and color, and then you have the layer system and all that jazz. And it's you can have a huge file and you still know what's going on if you have organized it, and then you have this thing which is not even showing up in the object manager, which doesn't make any sense. But
right?
yeah, I'm not sure what they are trying there. Like, I think Blender started this whole node thing,
Right.
and obviously there's Houdini, and they probably think they jump on the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's I mean, I was confused even when the materials went to nodes, but didn't really. And I was like, "Oh, it's kind of like Octane nodes. It's kind of like Redshift's nodes, but it's just more confusing and less straightforward." So I just never use it, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Whatever." But yeah, just it's yeah, I think that the yeah, I say that Maxon and like Cinema 4D is like the Adobe 3D program. It's just like if you know Adobe programs, you'll be very comfortable.
Sadly, yeah.
But in a good way. You if you know those, you'll be comfortable here. I think it's like an easy jumping off point. Graphic designers can get into it and like understand it. Are you a big layers guy? I know Cornelius and Raphael, I think, are heavily into, but their scenes are massive, so they must, or else it would be impossible to manage them.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I use layers a lot, actually.
Mm.
So there's no object which isn't layered in my
Mm.
scenes.
I've
So
just become a layer person because I found out that you can do. I had never even messed with it. I was like, oh, you can color code them and cool, but you can turn off like matrices per layer. It's like that saves a ton when you're like my grass, dust, and leaves, like insane things that are bogging down the scene. You just shut off like the matrix, stays on in render, and you just like turn it back on when you're ready to go. But you can like now maneuver around the scene. So I always have that issue. Is like I just keep building up stuff, and then like eventually I'm just like I can't move the camera anymore. I'm like, well, I could optimize, or I could start just like continually like traffic lighting things so that I can keep moving around. But then you're like doing stuff without knowing where things are, and you're just kind of working soloed. Do you like to do? I mean, a lot of your work seems to be like kind of your background of like studio lit, like beautiful like images of like singular things. But do you ever like mess around with like big environments or like large scale scenes, or is it mostly you like kind of the lighting, texturing, and like modeling of all the detailed parts?
I think I enjoy the modeling process a little bit more. Like,
Mm.
building one object and doing it very detailed. Not as detailed as Raphael, but
No
still.
one's as detailed as Raphael. It's just
Yeah,
impossible.
probably. But yeah, I also enjoy, like, to scatter some grass
Yeah,
and
yeah. Octane
these
Scatter is
things.
just amazing for that stuff. I wish Redshift proxies had something similar, because every time I use it, I'm just like, it's just so natural. It's just the right way to use a scatter object. It's perfect, and it's so fast, and you can just crank it up to like millions and millions and millions of stuff, and it just doesn't really care because it's all on the GPU. It's very smart. Way to go,
Yeah, it's
Octane and
awesome.
Otoy.
It's awesome. Like, I do have this one artwork which is called The Journey To. So that's some sort of environment, if you will.
Mm.
But there's nothing in the pipeline. So
Mm.
yeah, I actually do have a bigger project in mind, but yeah, like should I talk about it? Like this is
Yeah.
a upcoming question, right?
Yeah, yeah, we can
Like
touch on it at the end or now. We can whatever. It's not even structured. It's just a chat. There's no rules. You can do
okay,
whatever you want.
yeah, like it's a big ass project I want to do for a couple of years now, and I might I might gonna start doing it like in the near future, and it will take forever probably, and
Mm.
I might even have convinced Cornelius to help me a little, but
Ah.
yeah, we will see. um feel no pressure, please, if you watch this. But basically it's a short film,
Mm.
and it's about a disease,
Mm.
and in very abstract but photoreal way to tell the story. So yeah,
Cool.
yeah, that's could be anything, I know.
Disease is a little like too close to home right now, just with us barely getting out of a disease currently. But was that inspired by kind of sitting in lockdown for that long, and you're like, I should get
No,
these
no, no.
ideas out? Way before that, you were like, this is a cool idea.
Yeah, the idea is a little bit older
Mm.
already. um yeah, but it's basically about Alzheimer,
Mm. Okay.
and yeah, it's a very personal project, and yeah, I need to do this somewhere, and I asked a lot of people in the past to help me, and it never happened because I you know never started, and it was very overwhelming all the time, like
Mm.
because all you see is the blank page and that huge project you have in mind, and it's kind of hard to, like, if you have other artists which would help you, but
Right.
you need to tell them what to do, and
Hmm.
I think like a couple of years back I wasn't ready, so now I probably am. At least I hope so.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and then from there I don't know, I mean, like the biggest goal would be to do such things like for a title sequence or
Mm.
similar stuff, like I think that would be something very fun to work, to actually get some money from these rather detailed projects.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that like something similar to like The Crown, I feel like was always like a touchstone thing, and it's like feels like very like your style, something like that, where it's slow, nice, dramatic, moody lighting, and then you get to spend like this long time kind of making something that like a lot of people can see. um, but that sounds really interesting. I mean, I know that I think every artist has kind of that shelf mentally where it's like they have an idea and they just kind of like put it in a jar and it's like back on the shelf, and you're just like after a while you're just like catching things falling off and you're like, I have to make one of these or else I'm not gonna make it, because I've now filled up like my mental capacity to like remember these. Do you do a lot of like, do you write out kind of like screenplays is a big word, but like screenplays or like action bits of like concepts, or do you kind of just sit down with like an empty C40 file and you're like, let's just block it out, this thing that I want, and make the scenes?
Well, in this case, I usually try to write some things down
Mm.
so I don't forget them. But yeah, probably it would have made sense to just block it out.
Mm.
So at least I would have the block out now. But hey,
Do you do any sketching? Like, do you draw, or is it mainly
I wish I
photography?
could draw, but no,
I think
no,
that
not
that's
at
the other
all.
thing. You either can draw and you do 3D, or you can't draw and that's why you do 3D. It's just you can't do it. So it's like I can have the computer draw it and it will be perfect every time. That was something that like in college I had to do drawing classes, and like a lot of times I would just take what we were supposed to draw, drop it in Cinema, get like the right perspective, print it out on like a big sheet of paper, and just like trace my Cinema 4D scene and shade it properly to the like rough just preview shading that was at the time, and no one ever caught me. So I guess that works if you want to cheat in college as well. That's a way to do it if you have cinema.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
what is so you said main title sequence? That's like your biggest like dream project. That would be kind of like your you'd be happy with 3D if you could get that out of the way. Is there
I
any
think
like
so, yeah.
specific director you'd want to like do it for or film? Like, what are your like kind of films that like inspire you kind of to or inform the work that you do?
Well, I love Fincher and Nolan, and I
Mm.
mean, like Nolan is not that VFX heavy, like as far as I know. And for Fincher, there are like really a lot of movies and a lot of shots where it's like heavy VFX stuff going on, um, which which is the good VFX stuff nobody sees, like
Right.
no Marvel stuff or uh,
I don't know. I
I don't want
always
to.
still love a Marv. I'll love a good superhero smash a city scene, but I definitely am always impressed where it's like I think the Social Network had that behind the scenes where he was like he shot something and he's like we'll just put in new trees. It's like oh yeah, I guess you can just use VFX for like your exact vision of something where it's like 90% there, and then you're just throw in some VFX to make this a little bit better, or make a twin in this scene. You're like oh yeah, I guess we always think of it as like have a guy fly around and shoot lasers out of his eyes, but it can be very minimal, very like seamless with the rest of the stuff, and rely more on shooting stuff that is pretty believable and that
Mhm.
stuff. Yeah, I think Nolan Dark Knight was like one of my favorite things as like a kid. Was just like wow, it's a cool superhero movie. It's like dark and actually interesting, and it's not like cartoony and like horrible aesthetic design with everything, but like Batman Begins was like wow, this is like cool.
Yeah, I love. I think it was the Dark Knight. Like that intro with the clowns and this.
Oh yeah, just the like Hans Zimmer, just like one single draw note for like 10 minutes of like them doing a whole sequence was just great setup for that movie. I love
Yeah,
this movie is
yeah.
so long. I try to get people to watch it. My partner will just be like, it's like 3 hours. I'm like, I know, but it's really good 3 hours. We could watch it and love it. And she's just like, well, maybe not today. So it's hard to get people to watch
Yeah.
that stuff.
Have you seen Tenet?
No, no, that came out I think theaters only, and I was like, I don't want to go to a movie theater. Like we were just still coming out of lockdown, so I was like, I'll watch it eventually. But
I see.
the
I see.
concept of it was very cool, and I heard
It's a
mixed
it's a
reviews.
well, I liked it.
Oh,
Like it's probably not the best Nolan movie ever,
hmm.
but and it's very. I think you have to watch it 2 or 3 times to get everything. But like there's also the intro sequence, which is so like if you have it on a big screen in the movie theater, it's heavy. And then they usually shoot on IMAX, like everything looks as pretty as
Massive, yeah.
pretty yeah, and it's awesome. I love it.
Oh.
And yeah.
Do you get inspired by like what is something that because we kind of always hear the like get inspired by things not in the industry. Like don't look at 3D work to make good 3D work. Look at sculpture. Look at like industrial design, architecture. Like is there stuff like that? Like do you like go on? I know like when I talk to Cornelius, he's like I just go on walks, like clear my head and like get not digital stuff for a bit, and then I can make better digital stuff. But is there anything that you do like outside of kind of the standard movies, films, anime stuff that inspires you?
Honestly, I think the first inspiration mostly comes from like other artists, and
Mm.
this could be in a completely different field or it could be 3D. I think that doesn't really matters. But usually, like at least for me, I'm trying super hard to understand what they did and to recreate something like this, to
Mm-hmm.
understand the concept. And usually it clicks when you do something else, like when you're on a party or
Yeah.
when you're drinking a beer or you chill with your girlfriend and watch a movie or something like that. And
Right.
usually, I mean, you can't do this always, but best thing is to like stand up and write it down or something like that.
Right.
Because the next day, like the whole idea is gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big sticky note guy, but almost to my own detriment that like they just stick on my desk for so long that they like collect dust and just like blow away, and I'm just like, I guess I'm not gonna get to that idea, and I just like shove it in a notebook, and it's like I just have a notebook like full of sticky notes of just like things where I was like, this would be great, and then just forget about it, and eventually I'll go through there and like make something out of it, but I have to make all of the projects I've already put like 2% or a week into before I can go to the notebook to make new ideas and stuff. But well, that was everything that we were covering. I'm gonna open it up to chat because we got some time. Does anybody? We got some people here. Have any questions for Alex that they burning to know? Good get to know you with Alex.
Sign me up for help on that short. Yeah, I will that. I will do that, buddy. Trust me.
Absolutely. I would love to promise myself, but I also overpromise myself on everything, and then I eventually just don't do stuff, and people are like, well, you were gonna do that for us, but then you just disappeared. So I've just decided to just not sign up for anything, and then when I'm really bored, I'll start to do stuff again. What is your you're on Behance? I know you put projects on there. Is that like still something that you? I know people were very into Behance and now kind of seems to have like drifted off, and it's like a place you just put your project up and kind of forget about it. Or do you like constantly like peruse Behance, or is it Instagram where you kind of see other artists stuff?
Like usually I check Behance when I open when I start the computer, like once every day, I would say.
Nice.
Because sometimes they're like very neat projects, and I love like how you can present your work on Behance.
Right.
And yeah.
Seems a lot faster than building a whole web page on your site. So it's like I always put it there first, and then I'm like, I've already collected all the assets. I guess I'll migrate it over to my website.
I don't even have a website still. Yeah. I used to have one, but that's like back in the photography days.
I feel like they're becoming more and more legacy. You kind of just send a portfolio link, and Behance is fine for that. But a lot of times it's just, I don't know. I thought it was a cool thing to have in college, so I bought one, and I was like, well, now I've already spent the money to build it. I might as well just keep it going.
And honestly, for me, it's like a lot of clients actually come from friends and Instagram and Behance, and then you know write 2 or 3 emails, and then you maybe jump on a video chat and share your screen, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you got the job. It's very easy, actually.
It's hard to explain it to other people. Like,
yeah,
I've had people that were talking to me about like applying for jobs. I was like, I quite literally have never applied for a job. It's just magically things happen to come up in my inboxes, and I'm just like, I guess that's what I'm doing for the next month. Okay. And you just go do that, and eventually they pay you. And then that's how you make your living. And it's just a very weird thing for other people to hear, like, so you don't interview. It's like, no, you kind of just have your work out there, and then they hope that you can actually do the work that you've put out there. And that's kind of the creative process for a lot of artists. Are you freelance or are you staff? I assume you're probably just freelance, B2B, it sounds like, for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'm freelancing for 1 year now. So I was working in a studio like in a town nearby, and I did most of the DP work there and some CGI stuff, but it wasn't like CGI heavy there. And I was working there for 5 years, and then Corona kicked in, and then I finally found a moment to jump out and finally start freelancing.
Yeah, that's somewhat similar. I was like a part of a 2-person motion design team at an ad agency, so it's like no one other than us knew at all what went into making the things we were doing. So it was kind of nice in the fact that everyone was amazed anything came out of that room, and they were like, wow, this is crazy, I can't believe we made this. And it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, we just like did some 2D animation in After Effects. It's not like insane heavy lifting on our end. And then they would also come in with like liquid simulations, and you're like, this is harder than the other thing, but in their brain they're the same thing that they're asking you to do, and you're like, okay.
Right.
And then after a while, that it's yeah, I just jumped out to be freelance, and it's just like, the control is like when you work in that environment, you can't expect, some studio or at that point agency to get a main title design. Like, it's just not going to happen. They do commercials and they do ad campaigns. They're just not going to be asked to make that stuff. So it's like, I have to go freelance to like kind of make those opportunities and like jump around to different places that can do different things to kind of, like you were saying before, I get bored pretty quickly and just kind of like want to go on to the next thing. And so freelance has been great, where it's like, can we book you again? It's like, nope. So see ya, and I'm just on to a different project. And it's
Right.
it comes with different issues of, constantly not knowing, where you're gonna work, or someone's like, what are you doing next? You're like, I have no idea. But hopefully it will be something. But this is,
Yeah.
yeah.
But luckily, I mean, it's probably a different thing in New York, especially.
Mm,
But like where I live, life's pretty cheap, I would say,
mm,
like for Germany at least. And like I don't need to work every month. Like,
uh,
it's okay if there's nothing. And I don't know, it turned out pretty
sounds
great
nice.
for the last year. Yeah. And the bad thing obviously is no one in this town knows 3D. At least
Mm,
I don't know anybody. And obviously there's no networking and no other guys you could drink a beer with and
mm.
talk about the new Cinema 4D release or shit like that. But yeah.
Do you go to conferences at all, or when we could go to things, did you go to like conferences to like meet up with kind of the hive of people like that, or are you a no conference, like just kind of view from afar and
Like
internet
honestly, I want
friends?
to go to one, but never happened in the past. So I
Mm.
hope next year we'll bring back some
That yeah,
conferences.
that would be
Yeah,
nice. I went
yeah.
to NAB here in New York. There was NAB East, but the actual NAB, NAB, and SIGGRAPH, and it's so crazy just because like you nerd out with people online or like things like this, but like in person when there's like a room full of people that are just like so nerded out about like a robotic camera arm, you're just like, this is crazy. Like, these are my people, and like these people all care about the stuff I care about. It's just like very nice because I grew up in like a small town in like Michigan, which is a state, which is like, there's arts there, and like I went to an arts college, but like, yeah, none of my friends like back home know how to do like 3D, and so it's just, they're always just like happy to see whatever I'm doing, and it's like everyone was like, that's cool, but no one could be like, oh, you should do this, or have you heard about this thing that's coming out? So you kind of, find your friends on the internet and have internet friends that are kind of, the people to talk to about that, which is very nice. I think it's one of the good parts of the internet when there's so many not great parts of the internet.
That's true. That's true.
Well, this was very nice and very easy. I know you were slightly nervous, but I think you did amazing, and people were all very interested in it. Thank you again for being on stream, and I think that no one really had any questions, so we can probably just wrap it up there. This will be up on YouTube, and I'll tweet it out and everything. And yeah, go follow Alex if you don't. His @ is on screen. And yeah, thank you everybody for stopping by. See ya.
Thanks, man.